The grease jar sat next to the stove like a family Bible, dark and full of everything that came before. Your mother reached for it without looking, the way she reached for salt, the way she reached for you. Here are 30 banned 1960s cooking hacks Black mothers used that were actually genius. Before anything touched the stove, your mother stood at the sink with half a lemon and a bottle of white vinegar, scrubbing every piece of chicken like she was baptizing it. In Black kitchens across the 1960s, washing meat was the first commandment rooted in West African food traditions that crossed the Atlantic during the slave trade. Enslaved cooks received the least desirable cuts, parts that arrived with odors demanding cleaning before seasoning could begin. Generations later, the ritual held. The lemon cut through slime and the vinegar neutralized bacteria before anyone had a name for it. Your mother rubbed every joint, every cavity, every fold of skin, and if you tried to skip this step, she stopped you cold. It was never just about germs. It was about respect, preparing food with the same care you gave the people eating it. If your kitchen did not smell like vinegar before it smelled like seasoning, you were not from the right kitchen. Every Black kitchen in the 1960s had a jar near the stove, murky and golden, filled with rendered bacon fat that never got thrown away. Your mother poured fresh drippings through a strainer and let them settle like she was making a deposit at the bank. That grease seasoned everything. Cornbread got a spoonful before the batter hit the skillet. Green beans simmered in it for hours. Eggs fried in it came out with edges so crisp they shattered at the touch of a fork. During the Second World War, the government collected bacon grease from households because the glycerin could be extracted for explosives, and Black families who had been saving drippings for generations just shook their heads. A single jar replaced butter, oil, and half the seasonings in the cabinet, turning the cheapest ingredients into meals that tasted rich. Today, chefs charge extra for dishes finished in animal fat. Your mother never charged a cent. She never owned a measuring cup, not because she could not afford one, but because she did not need one. Black mothers in the 1960s cooked by the look of the batter, the weight of flour in a cupped palm, the color of the roux as it darkened. A pinch meant something specific to her fingers. A splash of vanilla was always the same splash. She knew biscuit dough was right by how it pulled from her hands, and she knew rice had enough water by pressing her fingertip to the surface. This was mastery passed from mother to daughter through thousands of repetitions, a cooking language built on touch rather than numbers. The knowledge came from West African kitchens where written recipes never existed, carried through plantation houses where enslaved women fed dozens without a single instruction card. You learned by standing next to her, watching her hands, and when she died, no cookbook could teach you what she knew. The skillet was older than your mother. It came from her mother, who got it from hers, and each woman added another layer of seasoning no store could sell. In the 1960s, Black families treated cast iron like heirlooms, rubbing them with pork fat after every use, never touching them with soap. The fat polymerized into a slick, dark coating, better than any nonstick surface invented since. Your grandmother heated the skillet slowly, wiped it with lard using a folded cloth, and let it cool in the oven until the metal absorbed everything. That coating held decades of Sunday dinners, fish fries, and Wednesday night cornbread. The iron leached into food, giving families extra dietary iron during years when nutrition was a luxury. Scientists confirmed that cooking acidic foods in cast iron increases the iron content of a meal. But what science cannot measure is how the skillet carried flavor forward, how your mother's cornbread tasted like her mother's because the pan remembered. If the skillet held memory, the cornbread held identity, and the question of sugar told you exactly where a family stood. Black mothers added a pinch of sugar to their cornbread batter, and this single act separated them from white Southern cooks who insisted real cornbread was never sweet. Bob Jeffries wrote in his soul food cookbook that the line between soul food and Southern food came down to choices like this. The sugar was not much, maybe a tablespoon stirred into cornmeal, buttermilk, and egg before it hit the hot greased skillet. But it softened the grit and gave the crust a faint caramel edge that belonged on a Sunday table. Kids who grew up eating sweetened cornbread could taste the difference at someone else's house. That pinch of sugar was a signature, a line drawn in batter that said, "This kitchen belongs to us." Nobody threw away the water left after greens finished cooking. That dark, fragrant liquid, thick with vitamins from hours of slow simmering, was called Potlikker, and Black mothers treated it like medicine. Jackie Torrance, the African-American storyteller, remembered her grandmother making Potlikker from mustard greens, pinto beans, and white potatoes, drinking it warm from a cup. The tradition reached back to West Africa, where dipping starchy foods into the liquid from boiled greens was standard practice, and it survived the Middle Passage and plantation kitchens without losing a generation. Families sopped it up with cornbread, fed it to sick children, and used it as a folk remedy for stomach trouble. Nutritionally, Potlikker contained concentrated vitamins A, C, and K, along with calcium and iron released during cooking. What the rest of the country poured down the drain, Black mothers saved and served the next morning. It cost nothing. It healed everything. The cheapest cuts arrived, tough and stubborn, but your mother knew how to break them. She filled a bowl with white vinegar mixed with water, sometimes adding crushed garlic or black pepper, and submerged the meat overnight. By morning, the acid had softened connective tissue and broken down fibers that made cheap beef chewy. Wesley Jones, a formerly enslaved man from South Carolina, described a vinegar and pepper sauce used by enslaved people to tenderize smoked meats, a practice documented in Works Progress Administration interviews during the 1930s. That technique traveled through generations, landing in 1960s kitchens where a bottle of vinegar sat next to the stove as permanently as the salt. The hack turned cuts, costing pennies per pound, into meals that fell apart at the touch. Butchers sold the toughest parts cheap because they assumed nobody wanted them. Black mothers bought them on purpose, knowing vinegar and thyme could transform what others threw away. A single ham hock could season a pot of beans large enough to feed 8 people for 2 days, and your mother never apologized for there being no sliced ham on the plate. In Black households during the 1960s, meat was a flavor agent, not a centerpiece. A few strips of fatback gave an entire pot of greens their richness. A neck bone lent body to soup that was mostly vegetables and broth. The old folk song Ham Bone referenced this directly, singing about a bone traveling from kitchen to kitchen because even bare bone still carried flavor. This was economics turned into art. When beef cost more than a family could spend on a Tuesday, the answer was not to skip meat, but to use a small amount so skillfully that every spoonful tasted full. The technique came from West African one-pot traditions where dried fish or smoked meat flavored large communal stews. Nobody at the table felt poor. That was the whole point. A pinch of baking soda dropped into soaking beans the night before was a kitchen secret that traveled by mouth and never appeared in a single cookbook your mother owned. Black women across the South and the northern cities they migrated to knew that baking soda, softened bean skins, cut cooking time nearly in half, and reduced the digestive trouble that kept some people from eating beans at all. The alkaline environment weakens pectin in cell walls, allowing water to penetrate faster and heat to distribute evenly. A pot of pintos that normally took 3 hours could be ready in under 2. During the 1960s, when dried beans cost a few cents per pound and provided more protein per dollar than almost anything else, this hack was survival arithmetic. Your mother added the soda without explanation. You only learned it was there when you tried making beans on your own, and they came out hard, and you called her, and she laughed before she told you. The smell hit you before you saw what she was doing. Flour in a dry cast iron skillet, no oil, no butter, just heat and patience while she stirred with a wooden spoon until the powder turned from white to tan to the color of peanut shells. Browning flour separately gave gravy a depth that raw flour stirred into drippings could never reach, a toasted, nutty flavor that sat underneath the richness of meat. Leah Chase, the queen of Creole cuisine, whose New Orleans restaurant hosted civil rights strategy sessions in the 1960s, built her legendary dishes on this same dark roux. In kitchens from Mississippi to Chicago, Black mothers used the technique for cream gravy, brown gravy, and the thick sauce that smothered pork chops until they surrendered. You cannot time it with a clock, you time it with your eyes. And once she stopped standing at that skillet, nobody's gravy tasted right again. But if the weeknight skillet held quiet rhythms of survival, the holiday table held something louder, and nothing announced a celebration like a ham glazed with Coca-Cola. Your mother scored the fat in diamond patterns, studded each cross with a whole clove, and poured an entire bottle of Coke over the top before the pan went in the oven. The phosphoric acid tenderized the outer layer, while the sugar caramelized into a glaze so dark and sticky it looked like lacquer. The kitchen smelled like Christmas for hours. This hack came from the collision of Southern cooking and American consumer culture, where a 5-cent soda became an ingredient no fancy product could outperform. At church dinners and reunions, the woman who brought the Coca-Cola ham never took home leftovers. Kids peeled strips of the sweet, salty crust off the edges before adults said grace. The recipe traveled by reputation, one mother telling another, never written down because nobody who tasted it could forget. When your mother dropped a crust of bread into a pot of boiling cabbage, she was solving a problem modern kitchen gadgets still cannot touch. The bread absorbed sulfur compounds released when cruciferous vegetables cooked, pulling the sharp, eggy smell from the steam before it filled the house. This trick worked on greens, Brussels sprouts, and especially the pungent aroma of chitlins simmering during the holidays. Vintage cookbooks from the 1940s documented the technique, but Black mothers had been using it longer than anyone could trace. The bread went in when the pot boiled and came out before serving, soggy and spent, having done its job without changing the taste. It was practical chemistry performed without equations, a solution passed between women standing over the same stove, season after season. Nobody called it a hack, they called it common sense. If your kitchen smelled bad while you cooked, it meant nobody taught you right. The fried fish came out of the oil crackling and golden, and your mother laid each piece on a brown paper grocery bag spread flat across the counter. Never a plate, never a wire rack. The paper bag was the only thing she trusted because it pulled grease out of the crust without trapping steam underneath, keeping the coating crisp while the inside stayed tender and hot. Paper towels did not exist in most Black kitchens until well into the 1970s, and even after they arrived, plenty of women refused to switch. The brown bag breathed. it absorbed without suffocating. You could hear the oil hissing faintly as it sank into the paper, and the bag darkened in circles beneath each piece like a map of the meal. Friday night fish fries ran on this system. Catfish and whiting dredged in seasoned cornmeal and lowered into cast iron Dutch ovens filled with shimmering grease. The bag was always there waiting. Your mother's hands moved fast, tongs in, one fist, and the kitchen was so loud with popping oil and gospel radio that you had to shout to be heard. Nobody fries fish on brown bags anymore. The sound is quieter now. A capful of apple cider vinegar went into the pot of greens about 30 minutes before they finished, and your mother added it the way she added everything without measuring, just a quick tilt of the bottle and a nod when the amount looked right. The vinegar did three things at once. It brightened the flavor of collards that had been simmering with smoked meat for hours, cutting through the richness with a sharp tang that woke up the whole pot. It softened the tougher stems that resisted the heat, and it preserved water-soluble vitamins, particularly vitamin C and B vitamins, that would otherwise break down during the long cooking process. The acid slowed oxidation, keeping more nutrients in the liquid that families drank as potlikker. Modern nutritionists now recommend adding acid to slow-cooked vegetables for exactly this reason, but Black mothers in the 1960s did not need a study. They needed greens that tasted alive even after 4 hours on the stove, and vinegar delivered. If vinegar kept the greens alive, ice cube trays kept everything else from dying. Your mother froze leftover chicken broth, ham drippings, and vegetable stock in ice cube trays so nothing went to waste, and she guarded those trays like contraband. Children who reached into the freezer expecting ice for their Kool-Aid and instead got a mouthful of frozen turkey broth learned that lesson exactly once. The trays were a filing system for flavor. Each cube held about 2 tablespoons of concentrated stock, perfect for deglazing a pan, starting a pot of rice, or adding richness to gravy on a Wednesday night when there was no time to make broth from scratch. The practice exploded during the 1950s and 60s when affordable home freezers became common in Black households migrating north, and women who had canned and dried everything in the South suddenly had a new tool for preservation. Those frozen cubes meant a $3 chicken could keep giving flavor for weeks after the last drumstick was gone. Your mother never owned a cooking thermometer. She tested oil temperature the same way her mother did, by dropping a tiny pinch of flour into the skillet and watching what happened. If it sank and sat there, the oil was too cold. If it sizzled gently and floated, the oil was ready. If it turned black in 2 seconds, she pulled the pan off the burner. Some women dropped a small cube of bread instead, timing how quickly it turned a golden brown. 50 seconds to 1 minute meant the oil sat between 325 and 375 degrees, the perfect range for frying chicken, fish, or fritters without burning the outside while the inside stayed raw. This was knowledge carried in the body, not in a manual. The old women knew exactly when the grease was right just by listening to the pop, a sound that changed pitch as the temperature climbed. You stood next to her and learned to hear it too. Without her, you burn things. You always burn things. Salt cod and salt mackerel arrived in Black kitchens, stiff as boards and crusted white with brine, and your mother knew the only way to make them edible was patience. She soaked the fish overnight in cold water, draining and refilling the bowl at least 3 times to draw the salt out gradually without destroying the texture of the flesh. This technique came directly from Caribbean and West African diaspora cooking, where salt-preserved fish was a staple protein that cost far less than fresh meat. In port cities like Baltimore, Charleston, and New Orleans, saltfish had been a working-class staple since the 18th century, and by the 1960s, It remained a budget lifeline in households stretching every dollar. The 3 changes of water were not negotiable. 1 soak left the fish too salty to eat. 2 soaks left a sharpness that overpowered the dish. 3 soaks brought the salt down to the level where the fish tasted seasoned rather than preserved, ready for frying with onions and peppers or flaking into cakes with cornmeal. Anybody who spent time in a 1960s black kitchen had at least one grease burn scar, usually on the forearm, and your mother wore hers without complaint, but she also knew how to reduce the violence. Before meat or fish hit the hot oil, she sprinkled a thin layer of salt across the bottom of the skillet. The salt absorbed moisture that would otherwise explode on contact with the fat, reducing those vicious pops that sent grease flying across the stove and onto your skin. The trick worked because water and hot oil are enemies, and the salt acted as a buffer, soaking up surface moisture before it could turn to steam beneath the oil. Grandmothers debated whether fine salt or coarse salt worked better, and kitchens ran hot with opinions. Somebody always had a story about the time grease jumped clear off the stove and hit the wall, or the cousin who caught a drop on her cheek and still had the mark. Salt could not stop every splatter, but it tamed the worst of it, and that was enough. Nothing got thrown away in your mother's kitchen, especially not bread. When a loaf went stale on the counter, she wrapped it in a damp dish towel and set it in a warm oven for 10 minutes, and the bread came out soft again, with a crust that crackled like it was freshly baked. The moisture from the towel rehydrated the starch molecules that had crystallized as the bread aged, reversing the styling process almost completely. This was a Depression-era hack that black families carried straight through the 1960s without ever questioning it, because waste was something other people could afford. If the was too far gone for the damp towel trick, it became French toast the next morning or bread pudding on Sunday. If even that failed, the dried slices went into a paper bag and got crushed into breadcrumbs for coating fried pork chops. Every stage of that loaf had a purpose. Your mother made sure of it, and now that she is gone, you throw away bread without thinking, and something in you flinches every time. Where stale bread found new life in the oven, vegetables found their soul in the fat. Black mothers in the 1960s did not reach for butter when cooking greens, beans, or cabbage. They reached for fatback, that thick slab of cured salted pork fat sliced from the back of the hog, and they dropped it into the pot before anything else. The fat rendered slowly as the vegetables simmered, releasing a smoky, salty depth that butter could not touch. This was West African one-pot cooking adapted to the American South, where pork was the cheapest and most available animal fat for generations. A single piece of fatback costing a few cents could season a pot large enough for the whole family. Food historians like Michael Twitty have documented how enslaved cooks used salt pork and fatback as their primary seasoning agents, building layers of flavor that European butter-based cooking could not replicate. The technique defined soul food, and the women who practiced it turned a scrap of fat into the foundation of a cuisine. Saturday morning pancakes started with a raw potato cut in half and rubbed across the surface of the hot griddle. And if you never saw your mother do this, you missed one of the quietest hacks in the kitchen. The starch from the potato created a thin, invisible film that prevented batter from sticking without the smoke that came from greasing the griddle with butter or oil. Vintage cookbooks from the 1940s and 50s recommended the trick, noting that cakes browned more evenly and the griddle stayed cleaner between batches. Your mother greased the surface for the first pancake only, then switched to the potato for every round after that. The kitchen filled with the smell of browning batter and the faint, starchy sweetness of cooked potato residue, and the pancakes came off the griddle golden and uniform with none of the dark spots that pooled butter left behind. It was a small thing, but small things accumulate, and this one meant perfect pancakes every single Saturday for years. Your mother's coffee was strong enough to wake the dead, percolated on the stove in a dented aluminum pot until it turned the color of motor oil, and she dropped a pinch of salt into the grounds before the water even started heating. The salt cut the bitterness without sweetening the flavor, rounding out the harsh edges that cheap coffee carried naturally. This was not a Southern invention alone. The practice existed in Turkey, Vietnam, and Scandinavian countries for centuries. But in Black American kitchens of the 1960s, it served a specific purpose. Coffee was bought in bulk, often the cheapest brand on the shelf, and it needed help. Sugar masked bitterness. Salt eliminated it. The difference mattered to a woman who drank 4 cups before dawn, while the house was still dark and quiet, standing at the counter in her housecoat, planning the day's meals in her head. That coffee was her private ritual. The salt was her secret, and the pot was always ready when you woke up. Late August meant the kitchen turned into a factory. Mason jars lined every counter, lids boiling in a pot on the back burner, and your mother moved between the stove and the sink like she was running a shift. She canned tomatoes, okra, green beans, peppers, and anything else the garden gave up before the first frost killed it. This was not hobby farming. In the 1960s, Black families who had migrated north from the rural South carried preservation knowledge that stretched back generations, and the women who canned understood that winter did not negotiate. Bryant Terry, the food writer, remembered his grandfather's Memphis yard as an urban farm with pecan trees in front and 3 varieties of collards out back. Neighbors grew food and bartered what they had. The jars lined basement shelves like ammunition, rows of color sealed under tight lids. And when January came and fresh vegetables cost more than a family wanted to spend, your mother walked downstairs and came back up with summer in her hands. Your mother saved onion skins in a paper bag tucked behind the flour canister, and if you asked her why, she looked at you like the answer was obvious. The papery brown and gold skins went into simmering broth to deepen its color from pale yellow to a rich amber that made the soup look like it had been cooking for days, even when it had not. At Easter, she boiled eggs with the skins packed around them, wrapped in cheesecloth, and the shells came out mottled in shades of rust and copper, no store-bought dye kit needed. The technique was old, older than anyone in the family could trace, and it connected the kitchen to a time when nothing was discarded because everything served a purpose. Onion skins also added a faint sweetness and depth to stock that plain onion flesh could not match. Your mother never explained the chemistry. She just dropped the skins in and told you to watch. But of all the transformations that happened in your mother's kitchen, none carried more weight than what she did with bread that had gone past its prime. Stale slices torn into pieces, soaked in leftover milk and beaten eggs, sweetened with sugar and vanilla, and a handful of raisins if the cabinet had them. Bread pudding was the conversion of scraps into something warm and golden that came out of the oven, smelling like Sunday, even on a Thursday. The dish traced its roots through African, American kitchens, all the way back to medieval European bread-soaking traditions. But in Black households, it carried a different meaning. It meant nothing was wasted. It meant the woman cooking knew how to make beauty out of what was left over, how to take the end of one meal and turn it into the beginning of something sweet. She served it warm with a pour of canned milk on top, and every spoonful tasted like she loved you more than the recipe required. She is gone now. The bread pudding never tastes the same. The bottle sat on the table at every meal, a recycled hot sauce jar filled with white vinegar and small hot peppers that had been steeping for weeks. Your mother made it fresh each summer when the garden peppers came in, packing the bottle tight with cayenne or bird's eye peppers and filling it to the brim with distilled vinegar. The longer it sat, the hotter it got. Wesley Jones, a formerly enslaved man from South Carolina, described almost the same preparation in interviews recorded during the 1930s, a vinegar and pepper mixture used for basting and seasoning that enslaved people made from whatever peppers they grew. That bottle traveled through 3 centuries without changing its recipe. Your mother shook it over greens, rice, beans, fish, and anything that needed a sharp bite of heat and acid. You could identify her kitchen by the smell alone, peppers and vinegar hanging in the air like a signature. The bottle outlasted her. The peppers inside dried out. Nobody refilled it. She never set a timer. She listened. The pop of oil changed pitch when the chicken was ready to turn. The bubble pattern of simmering beans shifted when they were almost done. Cornbread told her it was finished by the way it smelled, a toasted sweetness that drifted from the oven at exactly the right moment, and she pulled it without opening the door to check. This was sensory mastery built over decades of standing in the same spot in front of the same stove, cooking the same meals until the knowledge lived in her ears and her nose more than her hands. Black mothers in the 1960s did not need the digital thermometers and timer apps that modern cooks rely on. They had something more reliable. They had experience so deep it bypassed thought entirely and operated on instinct that never failed. You can buy every gadget on the market. You can follow the recipe to the letter, but you will never hear what she heard, because that kind of listening cannot be taught. It can only be inherited. And when she stopped cooking, it stopped existing. One ham bone made the rounds. Your mother used it to season a pot of beans on Monday, then wrapped it in wax paper and sent it next door with one of the kids, and the neighbor dropped it into her pot of greens on Tuesday. By Wednesday, it might travel to a third kitchen before coming back home, lighter and paler but still carrying enough smoky pork flavor to make a pot of water taste like a meal. The folk song Ham Bone described this exact economy, a bone shared between households, because even after the meat was gone, the marrow and the seasoning held. In Black neighborhoods during the 1960s, this kind of sharing was not charity. It was community infrastructure, a system where food moved between kitchens the way news moved between porches. Nobody kept score. Nobody felt ashamed. The bone went where it was needed. That system required trust and proximity. Families who lived close and cooked for each other without asking. When those neighborhoods scattered, the bones stopped traveling. The kitchens are too far apart now. The chicken sat in the refrigerator overnight, covered with a plate, seasoned the evening before with salt, pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, paprika, and a shake of cayenne. Your mother called it letting the flavors marry, and she refused to cook meat that had not had at least 12 hours to absorb what she put on it. The science is osmosis. Salt draws moisture from the surface, dissolves the seasoning into a concentrated brine, and then the liquid gets reabsorbed, carrying flavor deep into the flesh. The result was chicken seasoned all the way to the bone, not just on the skin. This was patience as a cooking technique, the understanding that time was an ingredient and rushing produced inferior food. She seasoned on Saturday night for Sunday dinner. She seasoned on Thursday for the Friday fish fry. There was always something sitting in the refrigerator waiting. The kitchen worked on a schedule you could not see unless you opened the fridge and found tomorrow's meal already breathing. She never wrote it down, not once. Not the pound cake, not the dressing, not the sweet potato pie that showed up every Thanksgiving and tasted exactly the same for 30 years. The recipe lived in her hands and her memory, carried from her mother and her mother before that, an unbroken chain of knowledge passed by demonstration, and the stubborn belief that if you needed to read a recipe, you had not learned to cook. This was how Black women transmitted culinary knowledge, from plantation kitchens where enslaved cooks were forbidden literacy to 1960s apartments where your mother stood at the stove and told you to watch. Just watch, because she was only going to show you once. The tragedy is that she meant it. She showed you once, maybe twice, and you thought there would be more time. There was not. The recipe card survived because someone finally begged her to dictate it. The woman who never needed one did not, and every attempt to follow what she left behind confirms what you already knew. The ingredient she never listed was herself. Adding vinegar to Potlikker was Grandma's secret for greens that tasted brighter and more complex than anyone else's recipe. After collards or turnips simmered for hours with smoked meat, she added a splash of apple cider or white vinegar in the final minutes. This small addition cut through the richness of pork fat, balanced the mineral depth of the greens, and added subtle tang, making every bite more interesting. The vinegar also broke down tough fibers, ensuring greens were silky tender. That Potlikker, the precious broth left behind, became a tonic. Grandma insisted was good for colds and broken hearts alike. Families sopped it up with cornbread, drinking in vitamins and comfort. This simple trick elevated humble greens into something tasting like love.
Slab bacon. Grease cookies were a sweet born out of thrift, when butter was scarce and nothing could be wasted. Families saved every drop of bacon grease in jars, using it not only for frying, but also for baking. When mixed into cookie dough with sugar, flour, and spices, the grease gave the cookies a unique smoky richness. They were soft, slightly salty, and filled with the taste of survival, proof that ingenuity could transform scraps into something special. Children often ate them warm from the oven, unaware they were built on frugality rather than luxury. These cookies carried the story of resilience, turning what others might discard into dessert. They were common in households where bacon was a rare indulgence, stretching its value far beyond breakfast. The smell of these cookies baking lingered in kitchens, a blend of sweet and savory unlike anything from store-bought treats. Today, they are nearly vanished, their memory tied to hard times. Slab bacon grease cookies show how even hardship can leave behind flavors worth remembering.
Seasoning cast iron with bacon grease was the foundation of every Black grandmother's kitchen, transforming ordinary cookware into heirlooms passed through generations. After cooking bacon, Grandma poured the rendered fat into a tin can kept beside the stove, then used that precious grease to coat her skillets while still warm. She rubbed it in with a cloth, working the fat into every pore until it gleamed like black glass. This wasn't just maintenance, but kitchen alchemy, creating a non-stick surface superior to anything factory made. The bacon grease added flavor to everything cooked afterward, giving cornbread its golden crust and fried, and chicken its taste. Each use built upon the last, creating layers that told the story of countless family meals.
Boiled peanut soup was a clever way to turn a cheap, plentiful snack into a rich and sustaining meal. Families started with boiled peanuts, soft and savory, then blended them with broth, onions, and sometimes milk to create a creamy soup. It was high in protein and carried a nutty depth that filled bellies when meat was scarce. African American kitchens especially valued peanuts, which had been part of food traditions since arriving from Africa. Children who were used to eating boiled peanuts from paper bags found it surprising to see them turned into soup, but the taste was comforting. For many, it was a dish of invention, born of necessity, yet delicious enough to be remembered fondly. Peanut soup showed the creativity of cooks who could stretch a handful of legumes into a meal for an entire family. Though rarely seen today, it reflects the ingenuity of those who could not afford to waste anything. Boiled peanut soup was both survival and celebration, served warm with pride.
Cooking collard greens for hours was dismissed as overcooking vegetables into mush, yet African American grandmothers knew something nutritionists took decades to confirm. The long, slow simmer breaks down tough cellulose fibers that human stomachs struggle to digest, releasing nutrients that quick-cooked greens keep locked away. Scientists now understand that extended cooking times make minerals like calcium and iron far more bioavailable. Families gathered around pots that simmered all Sunday morning, filling kitchens with that unmistakable aroma of greens seasoned with smoked meat. What seemed like patience born of tradition was actually sophisticated food science, practiced without laboratories. Those hours at the stove created meals that nourished in ways fast cooking never could. Soaking greens in salt water was non-negotiable, a step Black grandmothers never skipped, regardless of time constraints. Collards, mustards, and turnip greens came from gardens carrying dirt, sand, and sometimes unwanted guests hiding in their leaves. Grandma filled her sink with cold water, added a generous handful of salt, and submerged those greens for at least 30 minutes. The salt drew out grit and convinced stubborn insects to abandon their hiding places. She lifted the greens out, drained the water, then repeated until it ran perfectly clear. This patience showed respect for the food and the people eating it. Serving gritty greens was a kitchen sin no self-respecting grandmother would commit, and this simple saltwater bath ensured clean, tender leaves every time.
Wild persimmon bread carried the sweetness of the land itself, made from fruit gathered by hand in the fall. Families waited until the persimmons were soft and ripe, their astringency gone, then mashed the pulp into batter with flour, eggs, and spices. The bread baked into loaves that were dense, fragrant, and naturally sweet. Foraging for persimmons was a seasonal ritual, with children climbing trees and filling baskets under the autumn sun. The fruit was free, abundant, and full of vitamins, making it a precious resource when money for sugar or store-bought sweets was scarce. Wild persimmon bread tasted like the season, a warm reminder that even hard times could offer comfort. It often appeared on holiday tables, stretching humble ingredients into a dish that felt special. Today, it is nearly forgotten, overshadowed by modern quick breads like banana bread. Yet the memory of wild persimmon bread connects us to resourcefulness, tradition, and the joy of turning foraged fruit into nourishment. Each slice told the story of making the most of what nature gave.
Using bacon grease as cooking fat was condemned for decades as unhealthy habit that would clog arteries. Yet African American cooks never stopped saving every precious drop. Modern research reveals that rendered pork fat contains less saturated fat than butter and provides stable cooking temperatures that prevent harmful compounds created when vegetable oils break down. Scientists discovered that animal fats contain fat-soluble vitamins processed oils lack entirely. Grandmothers kept ceramic crocks by the stove, straining bacon, drippings for seasoning vegetables and frying eggs. What nutritionists once banned as dangerous, researchers now acknowledge as traditional wisdom that understood fat quality matters more than fat avoidance. That humble grease jar held more intelligence than years of misguided dietary advice. Keeping brown sugar soft with bread was kitchen wisdom that saved countless batches of cookies, cakes, and candied yams from disaster. Black grandmothers knew brown sugar turned into a rock-hard brick if left alone too long, making it impossible to measure. Her solution was elegantly simple. She placed a slice of fresh white bread directly in the sugar container and sealed it tight. Within a day or two, the sugar absorbed moisture from the bread, returning to its soft, scoopable state. The bread became stale, having sacrificed its moisture for the greater good. This trick meant Grandma always had workable brown sugar ready, never having to chip away at a solid mass. It was resourcefulness solving problems with what was already in the kitchen. Those kitchens went quiet one by one. Like and subscribe so the hacks they left behind never disappear.